Thoughts on the deadline, Chris?
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look just the entire way that the Red Sox, particularly Craig Breslow, characterize the deadline, I think is a tell. When he says stuff like, we were willing to get uncomfortable, or we were as aggressive as we could be, the language he uses to talk about the deadline to me is a tell that he's not really into the deadline. And that as much as this franchise has spoken about urgency, extreme urgency to win, when push comes to shove, urgency versus efficiency, at least baseball ops and the head of it is going to side with efficiency. And that's the reality of the situation. Do you think Dave Dombrowski thinks it's uncomfortable to have to give up prospects to chase a World Series? Do you think that's the language he uses?
Nope.
The language that Breslow uses basically tells you that this is an organization that's uncomfortable having to give up almost any prospect, having to cut off almost any potential avenue for the future to prioritize the present. And that's the reality of it. It's not about what they say, because they keep saying to us that they're all in, how much this season matters. It's about the actions. And the actions tell you otherwise. But where you can read into some of the verbiage and the rhetoric, I thought was just the way he characterized things yesterday, because he clearly came out swinging, trying to undercut the narrative of the Red Sox didn't do anything at the deadline or didn't do anything of substance. He talked about how aggressive they were, how it didn't align with other teams. They were willing to be uncomfortable, but I'm not sure he realizes just the way that he speaks about it and characterizes it is in and of itself a tell about how he feels about this. And we all know the deadline is not the most efficient time to go shopping for roster additions or to add to your team, because it's supply and demand. There's a lot more demand normally than supply. So it's not efficient. It's much more efficient to try and do these things in the offseason. And once again, as I said, this is an organization now the entire decade that has prioritized efficiency over urgency. And you saw it once again yesterday.
Is that a John Henry or a Craig Breslow thing?
I do think it starts at the very top, but I also look at it and think that Breslow has some responsibility for this as well. I don't think the Red Sox ever really intended to deviate that much from the Chaim Bloom plan. I think they just sort of lost faith in his ability to execute it quickly. And I think they also realized the fan base had lost faith in him. And so they needed a reset, just to sort of get back some goodwill with the fans. But I don't ever really think that they wanted to get so far away from and so far afield from what Chaim Bloom was trying to do. And when you look at Craig Breslow, it's sort of more of the same in terms of executing the plan. Now, do I think that they thought that Craig Breslow would be this cautious? I don't. I do have to believe that they thought they were getting something at least slightly different from Chaim Bloom. And that's one of the reasons I believe that they talked up the whole former player angle with Craig Breslow. Former player, I do believe they thought there would be maybe a little bit more daring than we've seen there. But, I mean, you look at this deadline and what they did. Dustin May is basically this year's James Paxton, which is what they did last year. And I would say Steven Matz is like the left-handed Lucas Sims. I mean, it's tinkering at the margins of the team. It's not doing anything substantive to give the team a better chance to contend, which when you look at this season, I thought this season was a unique circumstance just because given some of the issues other teams have had, the Tigers have snapped out of it, but they had that long stretch of losing. I look at it, the American League is wide open. This wasn't a deadline that was just about the Red Sox trying to solidify a playoff spot. Why not us? Why not them? They could end up making it all the way out of the American League. The way the American League is shaped up, especially if they had been able to do something a little bit more significant at the deadline.
Yeah, look, Masmer, you got anything?
Yeah, just quickly, Mike. I'm with Chris in terms of the missed opportunity. If let's just say it was Joe Ryan. I keep going back to him because Joe Ryan's an impact acquisition. If you add Joe Ryan to Garrett Crochet, they could go to the World Series. They can get out of the league. They would be good enough to do that. Now, they might need a little more help. I'm not telling you, and they probably need a couple things to go right, but those two guys alone, given what else they have, would have been enough. And I'll just say that I think Chris's general point about they thought Breslow might be a little bit more aggressive than Bloom was and certainly what he's been, I think that's part of the reason that Theo's here. I think part of the reason Theo is in FSG is to serve as a sounding board and a quote-unquote senior advisor for Craig Breslow. They consulted him on the Bregman deal. I'm willing to bet my house that they consulted him on the Crochet deal. And the deadline gets a little hairier because obviously there's a clock on it. So it's hard to dial Theo into every single call when you're making the call. And I'm not surprised that the failure came at the deadline.
Chris, if it came down to Jarren Duran for Joe Ryan, right? Even if it was a three-way thing where it was Duran to the Duran to the Padres for prospects and then prospects to Minnesota for Ryan, would you have made that trade? Because obviously Craig Breslow, if it was presented to him, wouldn't. Would you have done that?
Yes, I would have done that. I know that the last month or so, Duran's been good. But, I mean, this is a guy that I've thought for, a couple of years now. I like him as a player. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I don't like him. But I also look at it and think when they eventually move off of him, because they don't seem inclined necessarily to sign him to a contract extension. They signed him to a bridge deal this offseason, but they don't really seem inclined to sign him to a contract extension. He was going to be 29 in September. When they do eventually move off of him, my fear is that they're going to end up selling low. This was yet another opportunity to sell high on him. I thought this offseason was an opportunity. This past offseason was an opportunity to sell high on him. They didn't do it. This deadline, he had been playing well leading up to the deadline. There were teams that were interested in him. I thought once again was an opportunity to sell high on him. Now, he does have one more year of controllability than Joe Ryan, but Joe Ryan is a top of the rotation pitcher. Jarren Duran is a left-handed hitting outfielder. He has great speed, and I would say he has above average power, but he's not a power. The Red Sox can find those guys. And if you believe as much in your farm system as they seem to, then what's the big deal about replacing him with Joe Stinson Garcia or Joe Stinson Nixon, or replacing him with Christian Campbell, who is someone you signed to a contract and believe in and doesn't have a position and you have to find a position for him, or some other outfielder in your organization eventually. If I had to make that swap and say, okay, I'm going to be stronger in pitching, but I recognize that my lineup might be a little bit impacted by not having Duran, I just look at it and think, and I listen to some of the stuff they said about Duran. When did Duran become Yaz? It doesn't make sense to me, this idea of, well, we absolutely don't want to move off of him. And I don't know if you guys saw my colleague Alex Spear's piece today about it, but there also is an element apparently of clubhouse dynamics where Duran has become someone. I thought Bregman was the guy everybody gravitated to, but this was in Alex's story talking about Duran. He said, meanwhile, Duran has been a player who is close with the young Sox core. Trading him would have represented a considerable risk to the delicate balance of clubhouse dynamics.
Delicate balance.
So his influence in the clubhouse is one of the reasons I'd have gotten rid of him.
Yeah, right.
Frankly, I'd gone totally in the other direction. And the idea of
whatever will Roman Anthony do if they didn't have Jarren Duran around?
What, he'll forget how to walk? Like that's going to happen? So, and I mean walk, like literally put one foot in front of the other. I don't mean in the batter's box. The whole Duran thing as a leader is so freaking blown out of proportion. It's completely ridiculous. Totally, completely ridiculous.
Should they have been more open to moving roster players in general, not just Jarren Duran, Chris?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, easy for me to say. I think Duran was the one who was drawing. The interesting thing about Duran, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to harp on Duran. Maz would know this better than I would, but up until about 2 weeks ago, they were still sitting him against tough lefties and pinch hitting for him in games when a left-handed reliever who was good came out. So that's kind of what blows my mind is that, and the whole mix and match thing, when people were healthy, he was obviously an everyday player, but when they faced a tough lefty, they were sitting him, and they were also pinch hitting for him and taking him out of games. Now it's like you can't move on from him at all, even if you're getting a legitimate number two starter. I don't understand that. That doesn't add up to me. And other things that don't add up to me are the idea that, okay, you're saying you don't align with some of these teams, and that's why you couldn't make a deal. But then when Breslow was asked directly about, hey, is it possible that maybe you guys value some of your prospects more than the industry does? He said, oh, no, I think the industry values what we have, a lot. Well, going into the season, Baseball America said you had the number one farm system in baseball. And yes, I know Anthony has graduated in Meyer, and I guess you could say Campbell too. But if you have the number one farm system and people like what you have, then shouldn't you be able to make a deal?
You would think, Chris, except, Mike, let me just add this quickly. If the Red Sox were dog breeders, okay, like we bought our dog from a breeder, I'm sure you did too, but you know what they would do? They'd keep all the puppies. They wouldn't sell them. They would keep them all because one of those puppies might win the Westminster Dog Show, don't you know? And they would decide that way ahead of time and never sell any of them.
Something doesn't add up. They have a top-ranked system. They tout their system at every turn. They puff their chest out about their system. A lot of neutral observers agree that they have a top system. Then they don't do anything at the deadline. They say, well, no one liked our players. And use it as a defense. Now, explain that one to me. If
I
you
know.
could.
Unbelievable. Again, that's what Breslow said last night. You know, people have to like our players. Oh, okay. So you overrated them or someone overrated them?
That number one baseball perspective. Never mind. I like that one is confusing.
Yeah, the right answer, Mike, that you're looking for, if something doesn't add up, they lack balls. They have no balls. They won't extend and take a risk and put themselves out there a little bit. They won't do it anymore. They're afraid.